3, 2, 1. Action.
Well, let me tell you something, brother.
It's so hard to find a hero anywhere. I was proud of that Hitman character. He fought for the right causes, and he spoke up, and he told the truth. He always fought so hard.
I loved being a hero to people around the world.
we're on a pause, shall we say?
Yes, yeah, on pause, yeah.
Well, I mean, the benefit, let's put a positive spin on that, is we get the opportunity to do this. And
Exactly.
I don't know if you were aware that the last month was, like, the end of last month was the 25-year anniversary of Hitman Hart Wrestling with Shadows, but I knew it was coming. And then I knew actually I wanted to do something like this because I thought variations of it have been done, like in terms of Bret talking about it over time and Paul J and things of that nature. But I thought someone who's involved in, I'll say it, you don't have to say it, the most prominent and biggest wrestling kind of documentary and, you know, kind of film platform there is today, Dark Side of the Ring, talking and giving his perspective on the biggest wrestling film arguably ever, I thought was a fascinating look at it. And I thought that would be a really wonderful insight, and I'd love to hear your take on it as well. And I just thought that'd be a really interesting perspective. So if I was to start, what was your not what was your opinion? Sorry, let me start with the big question. Has there been any film that has impacted an industry as much as Wrestling with Shadows has? Because if you think about it, it changed, and I remember speaking about this with Evan as well, it changed fan perception. Like, everyone got more fascinated with the behind the scenes. It changed the course of history, because without the documentary, the Screwjob thing probably wouldn't have been held weight or held on for as long as it did, or even been believable to a lot of us. So I mean, has anything? And also the films that we see today are probably large in part due to Wrestling with Shadows.
Yeah, because like obviously when you think of wrestling documentaries other than our series, you obviously think of Wrestling with Shadows and you think of Beyond the Mat, right? Those are the two of the big ones. Wrestling with Shadows was before that, and it really there's something happening in Wrestling with Shadows that has, I really do think it changed everything. Like, people are still that, I mean, you could listen to the certain people that think it's still a work, you know, they're like, but how do you watch that documentary and then you're like, yeah, it's a work? It's like, how is Bret's wife, like, that I mean, we can get into the minutia of the film too, but obviously the moment where she's like chewing out Hunter, it's just, it's like I don't know, like my stomach sinks when she's doing, because it's so it's such a person who is full of pain and hurt by these people she trusted too. And it's like, you guys knew what you were doing all the way through. But I think it's interesting that this film, it's a documentary made by the NFB, right, the National Film Board of Canada, which is like a very prestigious, especially in the documentary world and narrative too, but documentary world is very prestigious, like, stamp on a movie. If you have an NFB stamp on your movie in Canada, it's like, oh, this is the kind of, like, to me, they are, I could credit NFB with like building Canadian film's identity, kind of, like, you know, like, I feel like we kind of struggle with that in Canada as far as filmmaking, what our film identity is. And I think I could always point to the NFB to be like, because I feel like, not to go down too big of a rabbit hole, but people kind of, you know, Canadian film gets kind of a bad rap sometimes. like people, like, you know, they're like, oh, that looks Canadian. That's like an insult. But my counterpoint to that is always to look at NFB films, because NFB films are operating on such a high level to me, and Wrestling with Shadows is an NFB film, which automatically, it also gives this stamp of credibility to people who look down on wrestling. too.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of the artistic community that will look down on wrestling as not a real art form or not a whatever. You know, they'll look down on it. And I think when you release this like NFB prestigious film, set directly in the world where your main character, the voice of the film, is a wrestler, it was like, I think it opened the world, it opened it up to a lot of people, as far as wrestling being something more than they thought it was.
Mm. I'm glad you mentioned the National Film Board of Canada, actually, because that was a question I had for you. Because when I interviewed Jason Eisner a couple of years ago, he mentioned that to me as well. And obviously, not being from Canada, I didn't quite understand. He just mentioned it. I didn't get the opportunity to kind of expand on it. I was like, but he kind of mentioned it as like this big thing, and I was like, oh, what's the significance there? But that answers that question quite well, because I read about it in other places as well, where people were like, oh, it's the greatest National Film Board of Canada film ever. Like they touted Wrestling Shadows as the premier one from that kind of group, if you will. So thank you for answering that as well. When can you remember, because when the film came out, I was very young, so I'd say I grew up with the film, but like it wasn't at the time it came out, in terms of like I didn't see it when it came out and understand the significance of it in that moment. It's over the years, the more and more I've watched it, the more and more I've grown and understood stuff. That's when it's kind of I understood the significance. On your end, when it came out, were you able to kind of process and understand like how big this thing was, or how revolutionary it was, especially in the world of wrestling?
Yeah, well, I think, like, may I ask how old you are?
I'm 28.
28. Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'm 35. So
Yeah.
there's I don't think I wasn't quite. I knew it was a documentary, you know,
Yeah.
but I think even at the time when I was watching it, my film brain, like my understanding of like film language wasn't quite developed as it is now. And I think I still, maybe, even though it was this like Canadian documentary, I felt like perhaps it was a WWF like production
Production.
home.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I felt like this has to be something, even though it's so anti Vince in the whole film. And but I mean, I still thought it was like, or not WWF, maybe WCW, because I know that becomes part of the story later, is the battle between the, like, you know, what Vince had already signed to say they're allowed to use. He tried to renege on that, right? And then Ted Turner was like, well, no, I'll buy the movie, then we'll put it on Superstation or whatever, we'll have it forever. But no, I think at the time I thought it was I thought it must have been some wrestling produced content. Like it was there to, but at the time I think I was also like, I was more of a mark too at the time.
Yeah.
like very much more, like I was like totally, everything felt real to me. Like I was constantly I was one of those people trying to figure out what was a work and what wasn't. And this film was just a piece of that to me, where I'm just like, he was like, no, this is real. This is absolutely real. And turns out, obviously it is, but I think I was using it more as maybe as a, you know, it's funny. I think I was using that film as a way to like, as I kind of stated before, I was using the film as a way to add more credentials to wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, it was a way to be like, look at this, like this is what it's about. Like, this is why I'm so engaged and why I'm so into it. Watch this documentary and you'll get it. And I think even at that point, that was how I felt.
That's amazing that you say that, because Paul J, obviously the director, and also Jordan Peterson said,
right.
they both say that it's a perfect, and not in a derogatory, though they say it kind of as just purely from like for people to understand, is the film, they kind of showcase the film in a way that, or they just talk about the film in a way that this is allowing you to understand why so many people are fascinated with wrestling. So like, just if you don't get it, watch this and you'll get it. because I think their big part is, and Paul J said it in an interview there. Obviously, the '90s, even like when people talk about the NWO and stuff like that, it was that morality shift of what's good and what's bad, and people like what's bad now, and all that kind of stuff. And because Stone Cold Steve Austin became the biggest superstar ever, and he was in a lot of ways bad. And he wanted to explore that, but he didn't know he was going to get it in this documentary. And then obviously he found that, well, Bret's the ultimate good guy, and here's Vince, who's political and evil, etc. And he was able to explore the morality thing of what's good and what's bad. And they said that's basically why people like wrestling is morality. It's a clear good and a clear bad. Do you agree with that? Like, do you agree with the fact that it is, because you said yourself, it was your way to show people, kind of back up, like, this is wrestling, like, here, get it. If you watch this and you'll get it. And also, do you also agree that it's why we watch wrestling is the morality, good and bad?
I think ultimately that's the sorry about that. I think ultimately that's the kind of foundation, right, of it, the baseline, the cement of it is that. But I think also what I found so engaging about showing people that documentary was that on top of its kind of explanation of why people watch wrestling, it's that then of course the following business drama of like somebody trying, and like it was like being like, okay, watch what the beginning is to see the foundation of what is good about wrestling, but if you stay on, you're now going to even see a deeper side. Like, that's just the foundation, basic good versus evil. But then you get like, there's a different side that you kind of get to enjoy as well, where there's like such an interesting behind the scenes drama happening that it's fun to try to decode when you're watching, when you're watching a broadcast or you're watching your Monday Night Nitro. You're trying to like decode like what's Ted Turner doing here? What's he doing? Is this a dig at Vince? Is this a dig at WWF? And I think to me, I think the foundation is morality, good versus bad. But I think once you're standing on that foundation, you have such a rich well to draw from, as far as a dramatic dramatic enjoyment. I think so. I think there is a lot more going on than just good versus evil, right? Like, because but that was Vince's genius move, was realizing everyone saw the business as evil, right? The corporation of evil. And so he's like, then we will be the heel, that's it. The corporation will be the heel. And that's still like holding on, and I don't know. I think that is, ultimately it still is good versus evil, but I think there's way more nuance obviously happening there.
No, that's fair. Would you say, if you were to show the film to anyone today, particularly who's not a fan, do you still think in a way you're showing them to be like, here, this is why wrestling's so fascinating? Or do you think you'd show them in a different way compared to when you were younger?
No, I think that's I'm also a big Beyond the Mat fan as well. So I think both of those films are great companion pieces. Because they're so close in time too. They're such a like very close in you kind of like you see. I would say when Beyond the Mat is filmed, there's way more of my like work when I was into I'm still really into wrestling, but when I was like as a kid, though, it was my whole mind basically. At that time was the Beyond the Mat time. I feel like even Wrestling with Shadows, when it was filmed, I was just I still was watching it all the time, but I was like a little too young, to understand fully what was happening there. I think I would still show it, because it also is such a great, again, you keep using the word foundational. It's so it's such a good foundation for even where wrestling is now, right? Where wrestling is today. And a lot of these people you can still see their influence and still see their involvement. It's pretty fun to like now, if you were to like show where WWE is now with like Triple H and his, and then to see him at that stage in his career and like how he still is, like he is still doing it for the boss, you know, at that point, and like that kind of just continues on, you know. It's very, very fascinating. Like,
yeah, no, definitely. And I was gonna say it's still. I watched it back not too long ago, obviously in preparation for this, and just kind of refresh my mind. It's still I still argue that. I mean, you guys obviously with Dark Side have done a tremendous job of this as well, but it's still in many ways one of the best ways of portraying wrestling to a non-fan. Like in terms of it's like you said about morality and all that kind of stuff, having a human story with wrestlers. And it's still, and like I said, even in the way it breaks down, like depicts wrestling, where Bret's like, you know, I kick people full blast in the face and there's no bruise, or like, you know, I punch them and there's nothing, you know. He's like, but he's like, you know, people never say to me, hey, you're a hell of an actor, but they just say, oh, you're a phony. But you know, and then like, you know, the way he breaks it down and these kind of things, and also but with the story that tied around it with the good and bad, etc. I was like, wow, it's like. And also, you know, with Jordan Peterson talking about it in a lecture and, you know, bringing it up, you know, without, you know, being prompted about Wrestling with Shadows, just asked about morality, and he brings this film up. It's just, I was like, wow, it really is just such a brilliant example of how to showcase it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a good reminder too of like another thing. Now, just going just into the wrestling discussion, a little like, not that I needed any reminder of how great Bret Hart was as a wrestler, but you just this reminder of how like grounded he was. You know, his wrestling was all about, it was all about believability and like making like every punch, like when he says that, he's like, watch my punches, every punch I do it connects, you know, like and it's true. You're watching him. And then I saw just crazily the other day, it was trending, Bret Hart was trending because of how he took a stunner. I know, and like because it's like, you know, we've seen many people take that stunner, and I still I love a Scott Hall. I love like, you know, I love
The Rock. Yeah,
flipping around. But Bret, like you've seen that, right? He took it like it was like he took it like it drove his chin through his head. You know what I mean? Boom! Everything he went down so hard and it's true. You watch that clip and it makes you like, it makes everything in you shiver. It's like, oh wow. He's so good. He's so good. And that was also what I love too about this movie is I mean, the movie on top of talking about wrestling as morality, like good versus evil, the movie's about good versus evil too, right? Like Bret is like in the doc, Bret's like, he's a morally good, loyal person who's like trusting of his boss and wants to honor the corporation. And it's just kind of like, it's a lesson that, like, you know, a corporation and like a big business and whatnot will always like say when they need you that you're family to them, right? Like, you're family to us. Well, this is a family, it's a big family. But the second that isn't benefiting them, like they'll scrap you in a second. But it's the individual and the person who like works for that company who if they buy into that family mentality, they can't do that as easy. You know, like they're like, yeah, of course, this is my family. I'm going to trust you guys. Like, you trust me, I'm going to trust you. And then that's the individual is always the person that ends up being screwed. So it still is. It's good versus evil because it's a morally righteous, loyal person against an evil corporation. Like, that's what the movie is about, the doc.
Yeah, and it's also just from if I'm to flip it to the filmmaking and like storytelling standpoint, what a way to depict a good protagonist, right?
Yeah,
like obviously they didn't have to depict much because that's Bret, that's who Bret is. But like, how can anyone, like, it's again going back to giving it to a non-fan, how can anyone not root for this kind of guy? Because like he talks about, oh, I've been offered $3 million and he rejects it, and I'm staying with this company because they're who I am, and oh, I'm a hero, and I take that how seriously took being a hero to kids and being portrayed in the right way and all this kind of stuff. Like,
and honoring Vince too. Like he had,
yeah.
like, I have loyalty to Vince, like I do.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And I think, I don't know if he said it in Wrestling with Shadows. He may have said it in a more recent documentary, the A&E one. But he's like, I would have, like jumped in front of a train for Vince McMahon. Like that's how much, like, it just kind of blows my mind. I'm like, wow, like you're rare, you're a rare human being.
Yeah. It is wild. It's a wild, it's such a wild journey, that whole movie. And the fact too that what I also love about it is like all through the movie, the narration, like Bret is the voice, right, through the movie. So like there's no other narrator, there's no one coming in. It's like it's Bret's voice through the whole movie, and that I think gives it such a perspective, right? You can't help but be on the side of the voice that's taking you on this journey. From a filmmaker standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And he said that I watched an interview recently. Like he said that he was, whether the screw job happened or not, he was eternally grateful that he did this, because he said, I could never explain to someone, especially how the wrestling was at that time and how he was this kind of hero and this kingpin of the business, and just the crazy nature of it. He's like, I could never explain to someone and for them to be able to understand it. But he's like, because this captured everything so in such detail and had such behind the scenes access, he's like, it encapsulated my time, and what I would want to explain to people, I can just show them. Yeah. And he's like, and now they believe me and they can understand it, as opposed to me just sharing stories and them kind of half-heartedly accepting it.
Yeah, it also captures it, and in a like really like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not unbiased, but like a non-condescending way. Like certain filmmakers, again, it's that view of wrestling certain people in Hollywood have. They could put the camera on it and kind of in an insulting way, or put it together in an insulting way. It's like, look how silly this stuff is, like kind of that. But the film doesn't. The film is so it honors the craft, right? The film is so, even though it like reveals tons of information, but it still honors the, like, it never makes anything look stupid, silly. It always looks, it makes everything like, these are people's lives, and like that's the focus of it. Like, these are people's lives. People get hurt. People like this is a real thing, And I think the fact that it approached it as like just documenting a real job, of these people, was such a smart move too, because it just it means wrestling fans then are like, oh, this is good. You guys are not making fun of us. You're not looking down at this craft, and it's so good.
Yeah, and you talking about the revealing of the business. One thing when I was watching it back, what I found really fascinating was, where they do it a couple of times, but when they're talking about the Canadian Stampede match, the big 5-on-5, where it's the Hart Foundation versus Steve Austin's team, and they have the whole behind the scenes footage of Bret talking to Pat Patterson, Bill Bulldog, and he's like, all right, guys, we've got to figure out how the match is going to go, and you see them talking, and they're like, okay,
that's when he gets like the family involved too,
right?
Yeah.
And he's talking, and you can hear, like, initially you see them behind the scenes talking, and then eventually it becomes just the voiceover while the match is playing out, and you see them talking, and you're like, okay, then it's you guys all in the ring, and everybody clears out, and it's just you and Steve, and we're watching the match as they clear out, and it's just Bret and Steve. And then we're like, oh yeah, someone's gonna, bash Owen's leg, and you see Steve bashing Owen's leg against the post, and then your brother's gonna whack Steve, and then we see them whacking Steve, etc. We see the minute detail that's broken down, and then obviously it playing out again. As you said, it's respecting the craft, it's showing the craft. It's not a condescending or anything. And they do it for that match. They do it for the Bret Hart Undertaker match, and then again they do it for the Montreal match. But obviously, it's like almost the rule of three. But in the third time, it doesn't go how it's supposed to go, because as they narrate it, like he's saying, "Oh, Sean's supposed to put a sharpshooter on. I'll reverse it," but obviously that doesn't happen, etc. But I was just thinking, like, that level of detail, it was done then, but it's never been done since, which is crazy, because it was done in 97, and with how open the business is now, no one's ever been able to do it, or or WWE or whoever don't want it to be done again.
Yeah. Yo, yeah. Well, that's a big part of it too. Yeah, it's like that access and whatever. I've only read a little. I don't know enough about like the lawsuit that happened after.
Mm,
But I know, like, I know the kind of gist of it was, yeah, as I said before, Vince, they basically gave these filmmakers unprecedented access. Obviously, we're seeing it, and they
yeah,
allowed, like, you can use footage of the matches, you can use all that, blah blah blah, and they and then once the screw job happened and the film was completed, then Vince was like, I don't want this thing getting out there at all. Like, I don't want everything I signed, I take it back, basically.
mm,
And but then I think, yeah, there was some deal struck where Ted Turner was trying to get it, and then
yeah.
eventually Vince was like, okay, you can, like, you can keep that same deal that we had. Um,
I think they said they faxed. Paul J said they faxed. Like as soon as basically when they heard about the WCW thing, they faxed to Paul J. They said, "Oh, we can do exactly what you were initially agreed to, but you just can never ever give this to Ted Turner." And then that was the
oh,
caveat.
that's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, but then clearly the kind of the watershed or the downfall of that is that, yeah, no one has ever had access like that ever again. There's never, and there probably won't ever have it again. I
Yeah.
don't think. Yeah.
But even because WWE produce so much of their own documentaries now, and like I said, everybody knows that it's so, like, what it is now, obviously, especially in 2024. Still crazy that to say that it's 2024, but
I know.
but like it's so even under their control, like they've never done anything even remotely like that to see this breaking down of, like, I think you see it kind of in Beyond the Map, but they don't really, that's not really their style. But
Yeah.
but I just found it shocking. I was like, in an age where, not to say I need it, I've just thought it was so shocking that, like, it happened then, and in no
Yeah.
capacity has it happened anything like that since.
I know, it's true. And it's also like it's cool because it, again, Beyond the Mat is, I mean, Wrestling with Shadows is such a, like, phenomenally constructed film that watching that breakdown of the storytelling in the ring is so appealing to filmmakers, because that's storytelling. You're watching
Yes,
the same
yes,
idea of putting, of like, where do we reveal this piece of emotion? Where do we reveal this, like, where do we show this person has learned this thing, and where do we show, like, that is what film is all about, and, like, dramatic film is all about. And it's just so engaging for NFB, again, National Film Board of Canada, being these kind of prestigious films that a lot of the time before they blow up are just kind of seen by cinephiles, and people who are really, like, in people who are really obsessed with cinema. And I think that is so smart to see that in this movie, and how those people understand an aspect of wrestling, that it's like, it's storytelling. It's the exact same thing you're doing with movies, but it's live and it's in the ring.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's, I mean, that is fascinating, and yeah, I just couldn't get over it. I was just watching it. I was like, how has this not been done?
I know. Yeah.
And it's
Well, a
also,
lot of it is long lens, though. I love that a lot of it is like long lens shooting. Brett's mic'd up, right? And just
yes,
talking to people. So it's like, I mean, they must know they're on, but I mean, like, I think of that. I guess they don't really talk, or they go into talking about the angle, but it's that great moment where, like, Brett's there with his kid and Vince is, like, talking to his kid, and it's like, you're gonna
yeah,
be, one day you're gonna be bigger than your dad.
yeah,
And
yeah,
uh but that's clearly shot, like, the camera is quite far away, like, shooting
mm,
through a bunch of people. Vince, like, in that moment, Vince doesn't know he's on camera, he's
yeah.
just there, and that's the best stuff.
Yeah, it's, I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
another indication, isn't it? Is the it's the wire scene where Brett's weighing the wire in the meeting,
of
and
course.
they're just for the match, and obviously, and it's like this fascinating thing as well. How what they do is, obviously, because we hear that conversation, we can't see it, obviously, but they have this incredible contrast of, like, while we're listening to this conversation, this really serious conversation, we see Blade playing with the headbangers and, like, running
Yes.
around, and Julie kind of,
Yes.
like, looking concerned, and this amazing mix of contrast. And I
Yeah.
was just like, again, just I was baffled by, like, the genius of it. It was
So good.
masterful.
It's so good. Yeah.
Yeah, and also, I don't know if it also kind of encapsulates, like, people, when it comes to documentary filmmaking, people talk about the 6 modes of documentary filmmaking, like poetic and, like, observational, things of that nature. And in a way, like, this almost captures the majority
I think so.
very intelligently, like in different ways, and just masterfully blends it together.
Yeah, there's a reason it's on a lot of people's top 10 lists of films. Like it's just one. I It's on mine. Like I actually do ever do Letterboxd.
Yeah. I just recently I started.
Oh, I should add you on it. That's great. Yeah, your top four.
Yeah.
Right. I definitely, it's not in my top four, but it's almost been in there multiple times. Like there's many times where I'm like, oh, I just don't know what I would remove from my four right now. but it's just so everybody knows, like Wrestling with Shadows is like it's like hovering above all of them. Like I just
what's the four, may I ask?
Oh yeah, the four are American Movie, documentary called American Movie. I just love that film. Crazy. An American Werewolf in London.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my faves. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
And Straight Time. Movie with Dustin Hoffman, Gary Busey from like 74. I think it really changed the whole gamut of filmmaking, but I won't go down that. But yeah, those are my four right now. But Wrestling with Shadows is, as I swear, it's almost replaced all of them. Texas Chainsaw. Nothing. I don't think anything will replace Texas Chainsaw.
Maybe this conversation is going to just go back, get you back, and then it's going to enter the top four.
Yeah, I might have to pull out Straight Time. I might have to pull out Straight Time.
I mean, like I said, it encapsulates all the areas of documentary, but it also captures the beauty of what documentary filmmaking can be. Like, because Paul J didn't know what he was going to get doing this. Like, he openly admits that himself. He didn't know the screw job was going to happen. He didn't know he was going to be able to showcase and talk about morality in so many brilliant ways. The Wire conversation, like there's so many different moments, like where Julie's talking, like there's so many conversations where Bret talks to Julie, and Julie's almost like foreshadowing the events that are about to transpire, because she's constantly like, what happens if Vince doesn't what happens if he doesn't agree to this or do? And I was like, oh my god, like, but obviously they don't know. Like, even just there's one simple shot of, I think, the beginning of the film, and it comes back again at the end where Bret's walking in the hotel before Survivor Series, and it's
down towards the camera,
and it's like this shadowy, dark, and it just perfectly like captures the tone of that moment, that scene, like him stressed and this tension. And I was like, you guys didn't know that this was going to all kind of connect like this, but
B-roll at that moment, you're just like, exactly.
And it's just, but it's just like, wow, like that is documentary filmmaking at its like core, and the beauty of it, and what, so in a way, like filmmaking in its purest sense.
100%. 100%. And it's so interesting because you, like, as a documentary, when you're making a documentary, it's especially when it's something that's happening live, in a verite style documentary, when you're actually documenting a live journey of somebody, it is hard to know when do you stop, right? Like when has your dramatic, when has your conclusion happen? Like what, and a lot of times people can't follow somebody forever, right? Because they have to go do other work and other jobs. But it's so amazing that this, I guess, like I'd love to know more of that story. Like, did it just start as like they just got access to Bret Hart, who at the time was like the most famous Canadian in the world, and it's like, we're gonna go follow Bret Hart as he's deciding to stay with the company. Like, it's so interesting. Like, what was their, because you when you pitch a doc, you have to have a like a rough outline, right?
Sure,
but you don't have to follow that at all. Everything can change the documentary, which is so great. But I wonder what their original pitch was. Like, what was their conceit to go out and start shooting this thing? Where it's like, we're just following Bret Hart. Following, maybe that's all you probably need to say. We're following the famous Canadian right now. And we're follow him in his day-to-day business and see what
transpires
like.
I mean, it's also that, but I'm not sure of the ins and outs of this, but like, if they got the National Film Board of Canada's like approval or backing from the offset. Like,
Yeah,
would that have been enough? Like that kind of simple of a pitch, just to be like, oh, we're just going to follow Bret Hart, like this professional wrestler around. It's an interesting. That is actually, I did think of that, but it's an interesting thing because obviously they had no one had any idea about this.
they don't know what they're getting into at all. Yeah. And I don't know if it's like, but maybe that was again because like at the time again, probably the most famous Canadian, right?
Sure.
Like at the time, and maybe that was enough, to just be like, well, he's agreed. He said he's fine with it. So yeah, maybe, but yeah, I don't know when the NFB, maybe the NFB, because again, yeah, maybe NFB came on after, right? Maybe came on to help them finish the movie or something like that, which or realized, yeah, oh man, you have something here. That's for sure. And so we want to help you finish this.
I don't know if you ever got that feeling watching it when you were older, like obviously and being like the filmmaker you are today. Like, I mean, like I said, I got it. I feel like watching it every time I see it through a different lens, and obviously from the technical standpoint, I've seen things like I said, with those shots and thinking, wow, how fortunate, how incredible was it that you captured this and you didn't know you were going to get this and X, Y, Z. Like, have you, I don't know how many times you've rewatched it or whatever, but when you were older, like, and obviously you understood these things more, did you ever, I feel like it's supposed to be hard not to think through that in that way, because especially being a cinematographer as well. Did you ever find that like
the technical, like what the technical?
Yeah, obviously, whether it's the technical or the shots they captured, or even just like the fact that how this thing all came together so just incredibly.
I think about that with like almost every documentary, every good documentary, where you're just like, oh man, how lucky you guys were that you were rolling in that moment, or you decided to. There's a few things that you could tell the filmmakers, and this is not a knock like at all, because like there's a few things you can tell that they like. Maybe some like there's something that happens. I've been on other doc shoots where this happens, where something is unfolding, like a phone call has come in, something's about to happen. So you kind of have to get everybody ready. You have to intervene for a moment and be like, could you just like, before you start, like I could see it being like, he's just talked to Vince, and then being like, Bret, can you, before you talk to Julie, can we just get our cameras going? And then can you just come in and tell Julie that you like just talked to Vince? You know what I mean? Something like that. I could, that moment feels like there's that moment where they're at the table feels like the filmmakers just sort of like, could you guys just hold and let us like, but and it's okay to do. I think that's fine, because you're still getting natural, real conversations and reactions from people, but you've just told them to pause for a second so you can get everything else.
No, and because actually that's funny you say that, because actually as soon as Bret tells Julie, and obviously he's quite distressed and bit like I'm just fatigued of the whole situation, as soon as he says it to Julie, he actually just turns to the camera and he's like, can we just turn this off for a sec?
Exactly.
I was actually, that kind of makes sense if that did happen.
I totally think there's moments. I mean, there's times like when they're when they're actually at the arena, like behind the scenes, you can't stop anything. That you're going and you're filming. But I think when they're in his house, they have a little more control, right? Because now these filmmakers are kind of become a part of the family there, and so you're able to. That's the dream, is when you're able to become so integrated into someone's. If you're shooting a verite, you become integrated into their life that they don't even know you're really there with the camera. That's or you're so integrated that you could just be like, can you just wait a moment and I'm gonna come around, and then you can tell me that again, or those kind of things are a big part of documentary filming.
No, I mean, this question I was going to ask you a little later, but I'll ask it now because we're talking about this. That's obviously, we talk about how incredible that is, the spontaneity of that style of filmmaking, and how incredible it was what they captured. Obviously, not everyone's going to get that lucky, because I mean that was just filmmaking gods or wrestling gods, whatever you want to say, all coming together to create this. It's epic and something that lives forever, especially for wrestling fans. But we've kind of felt like, it feels like obviously I love the fact there's more and more wrestling documentaries and content coming out. It's awesome, and they're amazing. A lot of the stuff is really, really good. But we seem to be in some ways stuck in the format of the sit-down interview format, which again, I don't hate that, because so like, especially the stuff you guys produce is fantastic. But knowing how good that can be,
I know.
Do you feel like in a way it's kind of like maybe we should do a little bit more of that as well?
100%. I'm always wanting, like, I was always wanting to do more verite on the road. But it's a time thing, unfortunately.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
budget and time thing, and that is where the conversation, I think, needs to, for certain, not saying for our show, but for other things, where it's like, if you're going in to do a verite documentary, again, you need that time to have the person trust you and care about you, and like kind of realize you're not there to hurt them, you're there to just tell a story with them. Because when you're only with someone for, like, you know, I don't know, sometimes like 2 days or something, like you're
yeah,
not, it's not enough time to really get them on your side fully. And I don't know. I understand being untrustworthy with a film crew. Like, I do. I get it, because, people get screwed over all the time. Like, it's
yeah,
like it's such a, and everyone doesn't understand the language of filmmaking. So when you inherently agree to be involved in something, you don't know how your words are going to be used and what context they're going to be used, unless you have sort of a savviness to filmmaking. Then you could sit down more comfortably with people and be like, well, I know how you're going to use, I know how to portray myself, because I know how you're going to use this, and I know what you're going to do. But a lot of people don't have that sixth sense or that ability, and there is a moral quandary there, where it's like, well, if someone doesn't even know what they're getting involved in, it's like, is that, I feel like it's better to then have spent more time with them, so they know who you are. And
sure,
that
yeah,
it's a time and budget thing. So it's like, when you go in to make a verite doc, you just need way more time. There's
yeah,
way more time to sit and know. I think also with docs like this, like Wrestling with Shadows would have never happened if it was like produced by a company that had a delivery date it needed to premiere this episode by, so you need to get it out there by this time. Then the story would have stopped at a certain
mm,
point, right? It would have stopped before Bret got to before the Montreal screw job. Say,
yeah,
like, the episode would have stopped to have like Bret being like, oh, I'm gonna go back to WCW. And that's where it ends. And then we have, like, we know what happens after, but because they had to meet some delivery date and some crazy schedule, which is kind of the world we're in now. There's like these insane schedules everybody now has,
yeah,
because they want things out so quickly.
mm,
Because, whatever, for whatever fiscal reason, they need to meet some goals, so you have to be releasing things so quickly. And I
yeah,
think you we are kind of, in film in general, are losing that the benefit of time. I
yeah,
think the benefit of time is people aren't realizing how important it is to just have more time with something, because you could really craft something or really discover something that you just can't discover when you're up against the wall trying to produce something and get something out.
yeah,
That's my opinion. And I think the people that have the benefit to do that are like first time filmmakers, because first time filmmakers, you don't usually have you don't have someone breathing down your neck telling you have to have this to me, a cut of this by next month. You have to
yeah,
have that. First time filmmakers don't have that, because they're making it all. And that's, I think, maybe the best thing they have, the most rich thing they have in their toolkit, is that they can go do work on this forever and they can make
mm,
it perfect. And so maybe it's like first time filmmakers can still make those amazing verite docs. And I'm sure there are people who can still negotiate, if that's what they're going to do, and if that's what the first thing you're kind of pitching to get funding to go make something is, it's a verite, and I need 8 months to film
mm,
this thing.
yeah.
Like that's I think it can still happen, but I just see it less and less, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that's what, maybe in some ways that's why it's so refreshing when you see it, because like The Undertaker's Last Ride documentary, the
Yep.
WWE one, which was unbelievable. But I mean,
Yep.
I guess they didn't also, but also because it was that WWE had control of that, right?
Yeah.
So, and obviously it was Undertaker and all this kind of stuff. So the freedom involved in that was probably a bit rare, where they
Yeah.
were like, we can just roll with that. But maybe that's the way to do it, right? So, and it's just in-house, I guess, if you will.
Yeah. The problem is setting release dates before you start shooting.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
That's a
because
big issue.
I mean, again, Dark Side is television, which is probably the worst thing, right? The churn out and the time is probably faster than most things, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We're still making things like, we're still working on it while they're announcing the dates, that it's coming
Yeah.
out. Like, we're not done. So that's yeah, just wild. But that's all
Yeah.
television. That's
Yeah,
all
no,
television.
100%. And this is actually really a question that just popped in my head, and actually a very mean one, and potentially because if you were to, because obviously you've filmed with a lot of people with Dark Side and some people you've built a rapport with. If you could pick one of those subjects and do a verite kind of style doc on, who would you do?
That's great. That's a great question. There's so many just flashing through my head right now as I'm trying. Would you say like a verite scene, or like like if we were to make
like maybe like a whole episode, but like in that kind of style,
or like almost if we did like a Dark Side feature long
yeah.
verite with someone. That's really good. Honestly, I know okay. Can I give a couple?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. This is going to be controversial, and I'm sorry, but I just think it would be so fascinating to like spend way more time in his life. But Nick Gage, I
Yeah.
think would be
Oh no,
fascinating.
I totally see where you're coming from there.
Yeah. I just think and to come from it with like obviously compassionately, and like I think we did develop a really good rapport with him, and I liked I liked interviewing Nick. I thought it was like really enjoyable, and I think he's actually like a super nice guy. And yeah, I think spending way more time with him though and filming with him would be quite rich, like a rich experience. Yeah. That's one. And then I mean, maybe just because I'm a huge fan, Mick Foley would be incredible. I know he had his own, but that would be just very fun, and like especially around Christmas time. I'd love to shoot verite with him, but she's already done that kind of. But,
I think he did that as the Christmas documentary, didn't he?
the
The I Am
Christmas
Santa Claus. Yeah.
Yeah. But maybe we do it more from a wrestling angle. I don't know. I don't have an angle there. But yeah, he would have been great. Terry would have been awesome. Terry Funk.
I guess that was that, that little moment that they filmed of Terry and Mick. I guess that's the closest verite style that you guys have done, is in a way.
Yeah, Terry Funk, that would have been pretty special. Which we got a little verite again. Yeah, and we got some with him when we were with him too. Got to hang out with him a bit, but I think there's certain people you talk to and you're like, oh, if we would have had more time, I think we would have really hit it off, just been like chatting and stuff. And once you get to that like chatting, just rapport, it's everything becomes so much more valuable. I'm trying to think. Yeah, Nick, I think is there's somebody I'm missing. I know there's somebody I'm not thinking of. Somebody who's like is if Herb Abrams was alive, would love to.
Oh, imagine that.
Yeah, that would have been great. Yeah, I mean, so many people are gone, right? So it's like, I mean, it's done. I mean, no, they've done it so many times, but I mean, that's why it's my answer, I guess, is Jake as well.
Yeah.
Jake is great, but it's been done. They've done it so on the mat, a big part Beyond the Mat, and then there's that resurrection Jake the Snake, right?
DDP's one,
DDP's one, yeah. And now it's like I think he is like in a pretty good place, so it's like I hate to say it from a dramatic standpoint. It's like what's your drama then? Like
there's no story, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, going back to that, I mean, it's still kind of focusing on you guys in a way, because one of the things I wanted to talk about is the evolution, right, since Wrestling with Shadows, and like how it's impacted everything that's come afterwards. Because it's arguable, without Wrestling with Shadows, we don't have many of the things that we see today. I think in some ways WWE thanks Wrestling with Shadows, because they've gone in that realm of those kind of films. And it's added extra content to them, and they've seen that, fans want this, and obviously they've done more and more and gone deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
Because I remember Mick always brings up that story. I think Vince didn't like Beyond the Mat for obvious reasons. But they did that. I don't know if you ever saw it, the Mania of WrestleMania. It was a documentary they made about WrestleMania 19.
Cool.
So it's actually great. It's really, I mean, it's a bit depressing, unfortunately, but it is really good. But it's basically because obviously WrestleMania 19, Kurt's going in with a broken neck to face Brock
Yeah.
Lesnar. It's
Yeah.
Steve Austin has a heart attack the day before and goes into Wrestle Rock the next day. And then kind of other stories. So those are the two feature stories, and they do interviews with Steve and Kurt, and all in the lead into that match.
Wow.
And Mick Foley famously said that he didn't like Beyond the Mat, but he made that documentary, and it's almost more depressing than Beyond the Mat in some ways. It's a great documentary, and it's fascinating and really emotional. But like they went really deep, but that's no chance they go that deep without a film like Wrestling with Shadows. And obviously even today, like what influence, knowingly, unknowingly, does Wrestling with Shadows have on, like, say, for example, yourself and the rest of the team of Dark Side and other filmmakers? Do you think that, because I think it's one of those things now, subconsciously it's having some sort of creative impact on everybody?
I think I think it has a massive impact on, honestly, not even just the world of wrestling documentaries, but the world of documentary. Like I think it had such an, and again, it kind of goes back to what we're saying about the verite conversation, where it's like there's such an intimacy that the filmmakers have with Bret and his family that is, I think, something you strive for as a documentary filmmaker. It's just something that is what a good documentary is, when it's clear, especially a verite documentary, when it's clear that the filmmakers, like my favorite type of movie, a documentary movie, is when it feels like the subject and the documentary are making the movie together, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Which is very much what Wrestling with Shadows is. Like, it feels like Bret is making that movie with the filmmakers. And and those are like, I mean, again, the shows we make, the Dark Side is a different type of, because rarely are we filming something that's live and happening. We're telling a story that's already happened. But I think when you're documenting like when you're doing a verite documentation of something, it needs to feel that way. It needs to feel like you and the person you're filming are making something together, and you know what you're making. And I think Wrestling with Shadows is a perfect example of that, and it should be shown in film schools, and which it wasn't shown in mine, which I should call them and tell them, especially because it's Canadian too.
Actually, and old National Film Board of Canada film as well.
And I believe the editor of it is like he's a teacher at York University Film School, teaches editing, I think, there. So it's like it's ingrained in our DNA.
Culture. Yeah.
So I think it really needs to be taught as in a documentary class, basically. Even just a filmmaking class, because the drama in it is so good.
No, 100%. And I mean, I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but like when I was watching back Wrestling with Shadows, there was things where they almost how they introduce certain wrestlers, where they introduce them, they show clips of like Vader in the ring, and he's like, it's Tam, it's Vader Tam, but then they talk to Leon White backstage, and he's tying his shoelaces, and he's like, I have a degree in business, and I'm doing this, and same thing with
developing some real estate properties.
Same thing with Mick Foley. And I was like, oh, that's kind of what you guys do, because you show footage like every time you're introducing someone to, and again, it's kind of like doing to a non-fan as well. You show the clips of them as wrestlers and their image, but then it's just them at the house and talking and chit-chatting. And I was like, I was like, I don't know if that was intentional, but I was like, oh yeah.
It definitely wasn't intentional, but how can we deny a subconscious? Subconscious, because we all love that film so much. So it's true. Like, it's true. It's so important to like try to snag a human moment of this, because we're going to show you a whole little package of them killing it in the ring and just the most insane shit they ever did in the ring, and then to hard cut to like, a very like kind of human sweet moment, be it them at their kitchen table looking at photos, be it them at whatever, doing whatever in their home, or even just like a slow-mo shot of them just walking around with their dog or something like that. That is, it just is a nice, you watch this little superhero package and then remind everybody's like, no, but they're still just humans, and that's why we're here.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
their Clark Kent, and then they were
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
well, I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me was like if we're talking about the evolution is because we talked about before in our previous interview was I asked you about like the negativity and the stigma that wrestling has and still kind of does have, and how it's kind of changed and maybe it's got a bit better. But after Wrestling with Shadows, especially films that weren't done by wrestling people, there was a lot of really negative wrestling documentaries, wrestling films with just the negative, and it was like they took the controversy element of Wrestling with Shadows, and that's all they took from it.
Yeah.
And then they just were like, just wanted controversy. And because, there was an ESPN one on Scott Hall, and it was just unbelievably depressing. And it didn't do any of the favors for Scott. And it felt very exploitative. Did I say that right? But like, but yeah, like it was just a lot of those. And it felt like people just wanted the spotlight, not like a great film.
Yeah.
Or an honest story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Like I think also part of, again, what we were talking about before, where it's like the film is about good versus corporation, basically.
Yeah.
Evil corporation, it seems like that's what the film's about.
Yeah.
And I think so much of why there's this positive is that like Bret in the film stands for like the purity of wrestling. Like he stands for, even like he stands for everything that, like isn't there a line in it about like Bret forgot it was a business or something, or Vince might have said that in an interview after.
He's like Bret forgot this was the wrestling business or something like that.
Business.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the whole theme, where it's like Bret is more about the purity and the craft of wrestling and the fans and making it for the fans. And the antagonist in the film is a business and it's all about a business. So it's like, I don't care how much you care about that, the business is more important, like the business side of it. Ultimately the money is going to win over whatever you're saying. And I think because you have your main character is this person who embodies in the film all the good things about wrestling and the positive experiences about wrestling and like what people love, because you have that as your main character all the way through. And even at the end, he still is that, even though he says the Hitman character died, he feels, but he still is that in his heart. It's like, how can all the negative controversy is around that, but that's the core of everything you're watching.
Yeah, and it's almost like, I mean, and it's like everything that came afterwards, like all the negative. I mean, I don't mean this to be funny, but that's almost like the dark side of wrestling films, that little patch in the middle, because it's just this string of negative and depressive. And, if you're trying to bring wrestling down, I mean, just pick one of those. Yeah,
it's true. And it's like, that's a big important thing to us too, in our show too, where it's like trying to always respect wrestling and respect even if a person's like influence in wrestling, at the end you should always feel like, oh, but this had there was a positive lift to all of this stuff, everything like that's dark, everything gets sad and dark and crazy, but ultimately like there was this light at some point, or is always kind of there. There's still a light that was on at one point, and it's still glowing.
One of the things that I found though is some people do now with everything's hindsight. So watch all this film all these years later, because you'll never get a story like this again, in the sense that no one takes it as seriously, or has ever taken it as seriously potentially, as Bret. That purity, and then I say that as a compliment to Bret, because he's such an artist and he was incredible, and that's why he was so good. And then I remember I would listen to this podcast with Dave Meltzer and Chris Jericho, and they spoke about the Montreal Screwjob, and obviously, and then Meltzer, I think, said like he watched the film back and he kind of found it like almost in a way a little bit silly now, that why did you take this so seriously, and you just lose and this and that, and I was like, oh, it doesn't seem fair. Like, and I was like, and I was also the film itself like explains to you why this is so important to this guy, like, and why it's not just this random, oh, well, like just lose. It doesn't mean anything. The whole hour or so build up to it explains why this is so important to him. So like, how can you now, even in all these years later, even though we're in a different world somewhat, how can you say that? I felt like in some respects, people are a bit disrespectful to Bret, and maybe in the film in a way.
I think it's a disrespect to Bret. I think you hit the nail on the head, where I think people now have their opinion of him now, whatever things, everybody, like, we all, like, he has a life beyond that film, right? Like, there's a life he's led, and I think, people have their opinions of him, or he's rubbed people certain ways. But that film captures a person who cares deeply about wrestling and cares deeply about the emotional core of what wrestling is, and it's been in his entire life, and that's what the movie's about. And I think that's who that person is. Like, I think that's what Bret Hart is, and how can you, like, that's what the film is capturing, him at the height of his career. And I don't know how you can look at it as silly, because it's actually quite, like, emotional to me, because you have a person who just cares so deeply about this craft, and maybe he's making the wrong decisions. Of course, that's what the whole movie's about. maybe he should have had a business mindset. Of course he should have. He would have been, then we wouldn't have got this movie, and would have been he would have just went to WCW, and with his night, it wouldn't have been this back and forth. But why we're watching this movie, and why this movie is what it is because you have a person who's, what they believe, what the thing that we're watching, the wrestling in this movie, is, he is the pure core of it. And, like, that's, I don't know, that's not silly. That's a hero in a movie. That's what that is.
No, and I think, that's how I look at it as well. And I'm like, I mean, I'm not going to get super political, but there's things going on in the world right now where morality and good is just completely stripped away, and it's scary. But so I look at something like that, and I'm like, that's beautiful. Even if you got screwed, but you still came out and you are who you are, and like, I want more. We need more of that in this world.
It's integrity, right? He has integrity. Like, that's what it is. And especially in the time we are in, this world that we live in, it's I don't know, integrity is very valuable.
And I didn't, maybe not, and I feel this is maybe a dark slant, but sometimes it feels like it's hard to find.
100%.
And my final question will be, just all these years later now, what's, in your opinion, maybe we've in some ways probably covered it through the multitude of conversations, but what's the biggest evolution, do you feel, from Hitman Hart Wrestling with Shadows to where we are today with documentary films, or wrestling documentaries more specifically?
Biggest evolution.
That's a big one, man. Very broad.
I know. I'm trying to think it through.
I'm being harsh. I'm sorry.
No. Like, I guess, honestly, maybe the biggest evolution is in the public's opinion of wrestling, and I think there is way more of a. Again, touched on this before, but I do think there is now way more of an acceptance of wrestling being something more than what people used to, what the critics used to think it was. Like, critics, as I've talked about many times, like, looked down on it and thought of it as kind of like a, I don't know, stupid, whatever, silly, things like that. But I think now there's a general understanding, at least from people, that they're like, no, there's something more going on, even if that person doesn't get it or doesn't understand it. I feel I've talked to more people who understand, though. They're like, but I get how people are really into this. Like, I've heard people have said that to me. They're like, that's not for me, but I do understand it. Like, I understand why people are so like into this, but then those people, I feel like people are saying that, and they're just a couple documentaries away from understanding it and being a fan, really, truly.
Yeah.
And so maybe I think maybe it's more of an evolution in people.
Yeah.
And being able to accept that this is an art form that maybe they're not into, but it is an art form. Whereas I think maybe back in the Wrestling with Shadows time, no one, like, you couldn't say it's an art form.
Yeah.
to certain critics, they'd be like, "What? You're an idiot. You're like, you think that's an art form?" But now I think way more people, and maybe it's just the bubbles I'm in, but way more people are accepting of it being like a real craft.
Yeah. No, I agree with that 100%. And I actually, funnily enough, I had a good friend of mine. He's a performer, but he's like a singer actor, and he's also a teacher. And I took him to a wrestling event, a WWE event in London, and I was just I thought he'd appreciate it, and I asked him, and he watched it yonks ago when he was younger, and he kind of liked it then, but obviously he's not watched it since and stuff like that. And I was like, "Oh, well, come along if you want," and he did, and he loved it, and he was just he doesn't watch it every week, but he was like, I get it. And like, and then he's like, oh, this is, and also being there live is a different experience as well. And he was just like, mate, that's incredible. And he marveled at like what they were doing. And I thought that was amazing.
Do you think you made a fan?
Yeah, well, maybe shall I say I made him a fan again, because I think he, like I said, once upon a time when he was young, because I think in some respect most people were fans at once upon a time when they were young, and I think he was that, but then he fell out of it and didn't really watch it again. But
that was like my journey, right? Where like I was a huge fan, and then I dipped, and then it was like getting back when I started with the show again. I started like ingesting it again, and then being like, oh man, oh here I am, oh here it is. I love this again.
No, it's fascinating, and I think that's probably the best answer. I think it's probably and probably the truest answer is that what that impact that it's had is that, and I think that's probably, at least when we're from the wrestling standpoint, probably the greatest answer. And thank you again for doing this, man. I love it. Was everything and more, man. I knew have your perspective and insight would be great, and I hope you enjoyed it as well.
I had a wonderful time. Wonderful time. I wanted to bring up one line in the movie that
I'll go for it.
I always, it's a throwaway line. It's B-roll with Bret sitting there eating with his family, and his daughter looks at him and goes, "That's a lot of peas, Dad."
Yeah.
It's a moment. I think there's a close-up on him, or no, it's from his back, and it's just looking at the plate, and she's like, "It's a lot of peas, Dad."
The one that actually for me is when he's sat with Blade in the car. And like they give it a massage, and he was like, and he's like, "Oh, it's right here in your sternum." And he's like, "Oh, I don't even know if you've got one." And he's like, "She's doing it on himself." But there's so many little nuggets.
Also, another nugget that I wrote down because I was like, "This is so funny," and I always remember it. But no, it's because I want to remember it, because I'm always think of the moment, and when I'm like talking about the movie with people, I always want to say when Jim Neidhart goes, "We're gonna get hungry and forget our manners." It's so funny.
I actually, in that interview when I was talking about when Bret said how he talked about it encapsulated his time in WWE at that time. Blade's with him in that interview, and Blade actually kind of interjects at one point, and he's like, "Yeah, if you see, where Vince is walking, and he's obviously been knocked out and he's kind of hobbling." And Blade's like, "I'm in the corner and I've got the big Bret Hart foam finger and I'm just flinging it up and down." And he's like, "You can tell Vince just wants to kick that thing out of my hand." And I watched it back and I was like, "Oh yeah, you can't see the foam finger."
That is, there is a foam finger there. That's so funny.
But all these little things, it's actually quite incredible. But also that's part of the emotional attachment you have to him as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Like he's just
I think in that "hungry, forget our manners" line, he says, I think Jim Neidhart goes through it. He said, "Where'd you come up with?" Because Bret gives that in the line.
Yeah.
He said, "Where'd you come up with that?" Bret's like, "A book of quotes."
Thank you. I'll let you go, and I'll let you get back to your family. Thank you so much, buddy.
Take care. Thank you. Wonderful time.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.